Good. All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Vice Mayor McGurk is running just a little bit late, he said, so we're okay to start without him. He will get caught up once he joins. With that, Sharon, if you'd call the roll, please.
Commissioner Hartman.
Here.
Commissioner Colodi.
Here.
Commissioner Sacks.
Here.
Vice Mayor McGurk. Mayor Owen.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, we will begin as always with public participation. This is your chance to address the commission. 3-minute time limit. I see most of you are seasoned public participation veterans, so you know the drill. This is your chance. Podium's open. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. It's happy to be here. Angie Beretta Herman. I'm speaking as a member of the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'd like to
Talk right into that mic, Angie, so they can hear you. There you go.
Do I have to repeat it?
No, you're fine.
Okay. I want to build on the comments that I made at the City Commission meeting a week ago, Tuesday, in which I asked that the commissioners and the staff think carefully about historic preservation and consider all of their actions, your actions, in light of historic preservation and the efforts that can be made to keep our city a historic city and keep the charm that we have. So I have a list. I'll read through quickly. Some of these you've already thought about. But for the first one is I think you should consider some deferred maintenance on landmarks and historic buildings. I sat at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting last Wednesday, and as we looked at changes to the Women's Club and the expense of repairing that building now, had we done maintenance in the past, would have been a very different situation. Plus, that building has been out of use for the city for, I think, about 5 years. And I think we should do something about our historic buildings. The Coronado Center that I was in a couple of days ago, I can see that that has just been painted inside, and that looks really quite good. And I think it could be better used. But outside, the maintenance is really in bad shape if you take a look at that building. So I really encourage you to look at deferred maintenance on all our landmarks and historic buildings. Secondly, consider an entrance to Canal Street Historic District. There's no marking when you come east from Canal Street as you enter that district. So I think some money could be spent there. I also like to encourage, considering if you're able to do with this money, an urban forest division. So bring together the various parts of our city divisions to actually protect and encourage our tree canopy. I know you have a tree forest that you maintain, but I don't know if it's actually brought together under with a concerted and thoughtful division of taking care of those things. I'd also like you to look at restoring the Turnbull Creek for recreational use. I don't know if that's allowed under your provisions, but consider that. I'd also like to see implementation of Section 50-34 in Chapter 50, under which the Historic Preservation Commission operates. There is a provision for property tax exemptions for historic preservation, which we've never implemented. And also under Article 3, 50-42 provides for a historic preservation grant program that's never been implemented. No funds have ever been, that I know of, have ever been designated to that, and I don't know if they can possibly do that, but I think that's important. And the last thing is to designate a full-time historic preservation officer. I know Bob Mathen has done a fabulous job of working with us, but I know we're only one of his many responsibilities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Ray Ingracia, 807 South Atlantic. And basically, I was just hoping that under these considerations for funding, under personnel, it possibly includes our first responders in New Smyrna Beach. I realize in talking to some of the officers, recruiting is a little bit of an issue. the police force. I'm not too sure about the fire department, but I think lately we've seen the need for greater police presence in New Smyrna Beach, and I respectfully ask you to consider anything you can do for our first responders in New Smyrna Beach. They do one heck of a job. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Others? Randy?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a nice occasion to be talking about too much money. We're
not there yet.
Yeah, rare experience. But it is a one-time and hopefully not repeated because of the reason we have it. But I don't know if the criteria are fully established about how the city can spend the money, or that's part of your goal today is to make sure the criteria is clear, fair, and equitable, which is a tough decision when you have lots of projects and a lot of interests. But I urge you to make that criteria as clear and fair as possible. It seems to me that it would be equitable to use this money for projects that we can't normally fund, and particularly with a longer range duration, things that we can't get at immediately that we know will have a bigger bang for the buck. And just as one example, perhaps we've discussed a lot about a seawall on the AOB site. There's some new seawalls that are being developed in South Florida that not only allow for the water rising, but also for planting that doesn't obstruct views. So maybe there's a way we can combine monies we've already allotted to supplement and really create something longer term that's a benefit for the community. The second thing, kind of in conjunct with the last speaker, increasing the bandwidth of our staff. I know the planning director talked about training. I really think we need to help our staff develop and continue to meet the complex demands of running our growing city. So if we can do training and or hiring bonuses or whatever ways that money could be used to increase the bandwidth, I think would be really important. And the last thing, and I know there's been widespread agreement that we often are confronted by very competent legal teams from developers that often outsmart the city. And is there a way to use some of this funding to begin to develop a legal defense project, committee, commission, I don't know what you want to call it, that could be there for us, whether they be consultants or whatever. So when we are faced with really difficult obstacles, whether they be on ecological issues or growth issues or whatever, that we have a team that can be called upon. So I wish you luck in your deliberations today.
Thanks, Ray. Any others for public participation?
Good morning, Jay Pendergast, 5900 South Atlantic. And yes, you're right, we're all the public participation veterans here. And obviously I'm here to promote the downtown parking garage. We have an issue, we have a problem, and we have a solution. And when I was looking at the list of things on here, we have Canal Street improvements, and we need more than flower pots. So I really want to see our ideas implemented. You will be getting a letter from the Chamber of Commerce requesting a steering committee be set up, and we are gathering all of our petitions from the local businesses. And if you were here last Tuesday, you saw how annoyed the local businesses are with the parking situation downtown. And I really feel this is a situation we should be addressing, and I think when it comes to infrastructure, this fits the bill. So I would like you to consider that request.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Katie.
Hello, Katie Liller, 461 Wildwood Drive, New Smyrna. I'm here to represent the New Smyrna Beach Skate Park. I've been coming to these meetings and meeting with you all for the past 4 years now, since 2019, requesting that the skate park get some well-needed attention. I'm thrilled to see the skate park on the list of possibilities for some funding to come through. We are in major need of a new building there. Restrooms, a working water fountain would be nice. and just some upkeep and expansion that has been needed. The park is being used more and more every day. And I also wanted to invite all of you and hope that you will come this weekend. On Saturday is the Grind for Life contest again that happens every year. There will be hundreds of skaters at the park skateboarding to help raise money for cancer. And you'll really be able to see the park being utilized in an amazing way and see why we need this funding for our skate park. So we are all here, Tari and John, who work at the skate park, and if there's ever any questions or help that we can do to help make decisions or move forward on this, we would love to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? All right. Seeing none, we will close public participation. Thank you all for your comments. We'll get back to many of these things as we go throughout the day. I'm sure I made notes on these different items. So with that, I'll turn it over to
Mayor, good morning, and Commissioners. This is your quarterly workshop based on the strategic plan that we have adopted for the city. This is an important item to discuss. Obviously, a lot of the cities got their funding. They got 50% of the funding so far. The city of New Smyrna Beach is supposed to be receiving close to $14 million. Initially, when the ARPA funding came out, the restrictions were so difficult in terms of the projects or the items that you could use it for. However, the U.S. Department of Treasury recently came up with some key provisions that made it more simpler to use. One of the important items that they have a provisions in, that you could use up to $10 million as a revenue replacement. After the $10 million, then the restrictions will apply on the remaining funds, which probably about $4 million. The list could be a lot longer than this list. These are the items that we have discussed with the commission at some point during workshops or during city commission meetings. I just want to note out of the list that there was one project that I forgot to list on this one, which is a very important project, and that is Washington Street reconstruction. We have received $1.02 million from the state, and also we have decided that we will use some ARPA funding, not for all of it, but for some of it. Obviously for the utilities to be upgraded, such as the water and the sewer. What I wanted to do in this item at this point, the lists right now, it's not in any priority order. I wanted the commission to go through the list. I'm going to give you a description of each one and what we're thinking, and then we could, hopefully the commission will give us some directions in terms of the priority. The septic to sewer project, obviously this is an important item. We have had a joint meeting with the Utilities Commission to discuss the septic to sewer. That's an environmental important item, I think. I think we need to have a starting point. The consultant listed several top priority areas within the city. My idea is to take one area and use that as a pilot project. Not necessarily to use the entire funding for it, but at least have some initial funding to begin. The historic West Side Stormwater Master Plan and the Coburn Park, and the Stormwater Master Plan for the North Beach, and updating the Stormwater Master Plan for the city-wide. I would kind of combine this as one component. The historic West Side Stormwater and the Coburn Park, we already have started the feasibility study and did the master planning. Right now, 2 of them is under design. So what we're talking about here is actually construction money. Probably the total cost for these two projects will probably exceed the total amounts of the ARPA funding. However, we have applied through the St. John's Water Management District for two projects, and that is the historic West Side and the Coburn Park. Obviously, it has to be a shovel-ready project with the St. John's. We knew that coming in, but what I wanted to do, I know we have a slim chance of getting this grant, but I wanted to be in the queue for next year. So we have other funding sources available for us to reach out, such as the stormwater utility funding or some grants to offset some of the costs on these projects. The number 6 is the personnel. We have discussed with the commission. We have done an entire study for the entire personnel. Right now, it's a very competitive market throughout between the public sector and the private sector. Some of the cities have used some of the ARPA funding to offset some of the costs for personnel. Obviously, this is a one-time cost, so which means still that you have to account for it in the budget for the years to follow. But that's a big ticket item that will be discussed with the commission further later on. Number 7 is the resurfacing. That is, I think, an important item for one reason. The city hired a consultant to do a study on the overall resurfacing for the entire city. And right now, we're almost probably 20 years behind in terms of the resurfacing. For the past 20 years, we have used $150,000 to $250,000 for the resurfacing for the entire city. The past 2 years, we have switched to $700, and thanks to the commission for approving that. I think that got us a little bit ahead, but still we're way behind. And I think we should use some of this funding for the resurfacing, trying to catch up on what we have missed in the past. Number 8, the mini sport complex west of I-95, State Road 44. I think we have ignored providing recreational facilities for the west side of the city. I think it's time to establish some criteria moving forward from this point. Obviously, it's a bigger ticket at this point, but my idea is maybe use this funding maybe to purchase a property on State Road 44. I know some of the residents were out here at the city commission meeting a couple of meetings ago, and they mentioned about the property that the city owns on Glencoe. We own about 81 acres, but 13 acres only, it's upland. So you could use that site to provide pickleball courts, but that would not make it as a mini sport complex overall to provide other recreational areas for it. So that's why I'm really concentrating on a mini sport complex and make it in phases where you could provide the first phase, but then you could build on, throughout the years. Number 9 is the Canal Street improvements. I know the city commission has approved $25,000 to do some upgrading of Canal Street, but I feel between Canal Street and Flagler that we need to do really a more of comprehensive improvements on both of these two areas. They're very vital, they're vibrant, and I think they need some specific attentions from us and then also from the businesses and the city as well. The skate park, we talked about it. We're going to apply for an ECHO. I think the funding for this is not that much, but I think we could offset some of the funding that to offset the grants from using the ARPA funding. Number 12 is the broadband. That is one of the items that was on the criteria from the U.S. Treasury Department as far as a project that you could use the funding for. Number 13 is the pier replacements. Obviously, for the past probably a year or two, we have been dealing with pier replacements damaged through whether the hurricane, damaged through the storms. We're always struggling with finding the available fund to do the repairs. Number 14, miscellaneous projects, and I think what probably the commission should do is use a specific fund for miscellaneous projects. Say like we're going to use $250,000 or $500,000, put it aside for miscellaneous project that might come up later on that we're not aware of it at this point. Some of this had been already used, such as Hope Avenue. Hope Avenue, we had a pump replacement there. We used the ARPA funding. Also, the Esther Street generator. I think when we brought it to the commission, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Hartman has suggested, is it allowable to use ARPA funding for the generator? And it is. We could use it. Number 15 is the Washington Street that I mentioned that I forgot to put on this list. Also, there is an item there that was brought up to my attention by the fire chief, and that is that you could use it for ambulances. So that would be an item added there for ambulances. I'm sure that the commission might have some other items or projects that to be added. So, Mayor, with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Claude, remind me, not that we're bound to it, but we had at one point talked about a rough breakout of like a 60-40 split or some percentage split of projects, infrastructure versus something else. And do you recall that, or does anyone else recall that?
60-40 what, for the overall project?
For breaking that, like when this first came through, we said, on the surface, we think we want to spend it about this way.
Yeah. I cannot remember exactly, but there was some discussions.
Yeah.
I guess we have to go back and look. But yeah, there was some discussion with the commission of they wanted to use for certain items. I think you mentioned 15 and 30%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I forget the numbers, but okay.
But there was a discussion, yes, sir.
Okay. So, gentlemen, the question is, what are the priorities? You heard somebody say that we have too much money, and I immediately corrected them and said, no, we don't. We could spend this money probably 5 times over with just this list, and there's probably 20 things each of us could come up with that aren't even on this list yet. So. We, again, are going to have to prioritize and figure out, do we go peanut butter and try to spread it, and touch a little bit of a lot? Or do we try to really hit a few things and get them, cradle to grave all the way to final state? So with that, I think we'll just come down the line and get commissioners' input on priorities of these items. And I don't know how detailed we're going to be able to be. We obviously don't have dollar and cents figures next to this, so it's going to be a little tough. I think we're just going to give you broad, hey, number 1, 5, and 7 are my priorities, but, a little bit of that could change, because I think most of us would agree if there's something on here that's a couple $100,000 and makes a massive impact, we should do that. So anyway, with that caveat, we'll see how this goes. Commissioner Colodi, you want to start off?
Yes. This is kind of like a gift from heaven. You get it, you got it, you get to spend it once. It's not going to come back. So I think we should follow philosophy we've had lately, is that we got to take care of everything we own now. We've planned for a number of things, a number of improvements that has resulted in a list of 14 different items that city manager has come forth with. I can agree with 12 of them right off the bat. I would like to pick items that will not cause us to impact our budget going forward with carrying costs. So some things like the skate park is a good example. We talked about a skate park for quite a while. Let's fund it. Let's move along. It's in our various parks master plan. It's kind of noted, but not given much attention. That's just one example. The subject of personnel is an interesting subject because we've worked very hard over the last couple of years to help out our employees, to keep up with the times, with all the increase in costs. I can't keep up with what I've been spending it on, so I know everybody else can't either. Everybody gets a raise and inflation's 50% higher. So I'm willing to spend money for personnel. I do not want to spend the money as a increase in the rate of pay. I would like it all to go as bonuses. We don't know what the future is going to bring. It could bring a depression, the rate we're going, and salaries, the pressure will go down because more people will want to come and work in a stable environment. We got to look back. We went through this whole COVID thing. We did not lay off a single person. We did not cut back on the raises we were given. We were pretty prudent with it, and I think we did our employees well, and our employees did well for the rest of the citizens. So any costs that we put in there or expenses should be a one-time type. I would give bonuses over a couple of years. If you got $14 million, I went down the list of projects. I came up with $1 million for that. Don't know what that comes out to per person, but that would be a starting off point. I also have, and I would recommend we go down this list one by one and give some type of priorities to it, whether it be dollar amounts or a priority list. I think we should do it. I don't think we should dither over this. We should come up with a decision and stick to it. We're not going to be able to pay for all these projects, the 2 stormwater projects. Right off the bat, we'll use all of our money up. I think we should focus on the original intent, which was to help the environment through water projects and water quality projects. We should focus in that area there. I have my ideas as to which one, but when we do our planning, which we've done on the 2 major drainage projects, we don't have to finish them all in 1 year. Get the planning done, we could phase the actual construction out. These areas have been there for decades. It's not like we have life safety issues in most of them due to the environment, but we can do it in phases. So those are my general comments. If it's the decision of the board to go down these one item at a time or add anything we want to it, I'm all for that. So those are my general comments.
Yeah, I was going to see if we had kind of consensus around a top, 4 or 5 or whatever the number is, and then really focus on those, because I think it's going to be hard to get to specifics again, because just you mentioned it. Let's say the Corbin Park Stormwater Master Plan is a top priority for all of us. Just picking one big one off the list, that's a massive, that could eat up a good bit of the budget right there, or same for the Historic West Side or others. So let's come down the list and then we'll come back to that and see how we can approach that. Commissioner Sachs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's a very ambitious list. I agree with Commissioner Colodi. You could probably pick 1 or 2 and blow the whole 14 million on that. What is important to me, and it's a newsworthy item as well as very substantial problem for our employees, and that is salaries. Compression is another issue. I hope we can deal with that in this line item 6 personnel. We have a lot of competition out there for the $15 an hour job. It'd be nice to even reach that for all of our employees. And then there's the compression issue, which I hope we can solve in this budget. And next comes stormwater. I'm not sure it would take more discussion to decide whether to combine Corbin the historic west side, and a general stormwater master plan for the city. It just comes to mind one area on Saxon where there's an outfall that just lets stormwater run out into the Indian River. This is an example of one of the projects I think we need to pay attention to. Pick out those outfalls in our city, the ones that have the most volume going into the Indian River. I think we need to take care of those and try and clean that water. These other items like, well, broadband, we'll put that at the bottom of the list. Although I strongly support broadband for all of our citizens. Skate park improvements would go along with essentially sports complex, that type of athletics and entertainment for our youth. We could combine, put that all together. But really the most important things for me are right now, they're not on the list, but it goes along with resurfacing, number 7. I've noticed that a lot of our lines are fading very badly to the point where you can't see lines in the street. You can't see the center lines. You can't see the lines on the aprons. And you can't see lines at stop signs and crosswalks. So that would, hopefully we can address that. And that goes along with our infrastructure, street signs. We still have not completed a street sign program, although we've seen some nice new street signs. There are some you cannot see at all. I just drove by the old Ford Park, and it's scary to see that one big crack in the wall. I'd like us to work on that, and that goes along with the rest of city infrastructure. You know, we still have a beautiful city, and people can be proud of that, but we're showing our age. And I really think, and I've been saying it forever, till I'm blue in the face, that we need to start fixing up things post haste. Let's get working on them. Angie Herman brought up the Women's Center, another good case, besides the wall at Old Ford Park. You know, things we really need to work on. I'm glad we're working on Washington. But again, it's an ambitious list. I think we can start with what I think is most important. Again, stormwater, personnel, you know, salaries, and even hiring if we need. And that's all I have for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. They're all great. I mean, as we've said, this list, plus the ambulance, plus a number of issues that we can add to this, are all valid, good projects and well-intended. But I think the way I've always approached our budget, and especially just fixed amount of money, is you focus on infrastructure. You don't focus on reoccurring expenses that are going to happen year after year after year. That's just not fiscally responsible. I have a difficult time building more when we need to upgrade and maintain what we have. So just on that, the mini sports complex, you know, I don't know what that entails. You know, that's all it says. But I can't imagine that we go build another mini sports complex somewhere else when we have a skate park and an existing sports complex that can still be upgraded. Quick question, staff. Fire impact fees for an ambulance. Where are we? Fire impact fees. Yeah. Why is it so tough to get an ambulance from impact fees?
Why is it so tough to what?
Why is it so difficult? If fire impact fees we're struggling to get an ambulance. To me, that is something that is, if it's needed, it's needed. It's a life safety issue. It's something that benefits everyone in the community. You know, maybe we take a look again at certain impact fees and figure out where or what we can do a little differently. So I don't want to get into that right now, but the ambulance is great. And it is a one-time expense, so that is better to me than personnel expenses. However, I will tell you this, going into the personnel issue, I've always said that has to come from our general budget. There's a number of issues on here that it's the cost of doing business. And I do not want to spend a big chunk of money trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem. If we need to pay more, if personnel's an issue, if salaries and pay, benefits are a problem, we deal with that with the general fund, a reoccurring expense every single year. I'm also concerned that if we put a Band-Aid on it now, and then the music's going to stop at some point, there's going to be not enough chairs to sit at, and then we're going to need to go to rollback. But if we do not put in the proper budget in place before we have to go to rollback, it's going to be a double whammy to us. So that's very important. So I would much rather deal with personnel issues as a reoccurring expense every year and deal with that like any business needs to deal with their personnel. I have a concern that we would create a much bigger problem than what we have now, not being prepared to go to rollback. The bonus issue that Commissioner Colodi brought up, that's interesting. That is something that that resonates with me a little more than simply just trying to give pay raises that we cannot afford the year after. So that's my general idea. Infrastructure and not building more without maintaining and upgrading what we have would be my focus on this list.
Okay. Commissioner Hartman.
So as you look at the list, I mean, you could spend all of it on any one of these items. You can give them each $1 million, or we could kind of go through the priority list. To me, what's important is, number one, is we already have projects that we've started. We have some projects that could be shovel-ready. We have projects that aren't on this list, like the Women's Center, Old Fort Park, that we've been investing in years in. We have state funding for that. We need to get those projects completed, off the books, and done. I would rather us spend money on projects that we already have started, that we're already in the process, that we've spent money on. We spent money for studies and specialists and consulting firms to give us ideas and things. And so I'd rather spend that money on those projects that we've already identified through previous commissions and have started to work on, and get those things through the whole process. We've talked about septic to sewer for years and years. The consultant identified one area that's in the city that would be a prime target for that, which was the Aqua Court. I'm all in favor of that. That gets that off the list. It's next to the Turnbull Creek. It helps with the environment. We have this historic West Side Stormwater, the Corbin Park Stormwater Master Plans. We've already involved thousands of dollars in those projects. I'd like to see money go into those so that those can get completed and that box checked off. Resurfacing. That's one of those items is that we've been struggling with for years, and on how we get that paid for. Unfortunately, the cost of materials and getting that work done just keeps going up and up and up. So I'd like to have that as a priority. The others, I think, are issues where we can move forward as we go through the whole budget process. So I would really like to see us complete some of the projects that we've already got started. My question is, would we be better served to hire a grant writer to look for grants for some of these other projects, so that we can have matching funds, whether state or federal dollars? I shared with Khalid the state's budget. Have you seen what the state budget approved? All of the small little recreational projects that the state is giving money for. You know, we've not looked at that in the past. We've gotten money for the Women's Center, we've gotten money for Old Fort Park. But there's if you go through that list, there's a cadre of things in there that are just small little projects that some cities and counties are getting $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 for these types of projects. So I think that would be you know, somewhere that we need to look for in the future, is to start looking at some of these projects. And maybe, you know, we talked about a part-time grant writer, maybe that, you know, we really need to focus on that so that we can get these other projects in the works and get them started and look for those matching dollars. I am curious though, is how much have we spent on the Hope Avenue pump and the Esther Street generator? Do you know what those dollars were?
Kelly had a question for you.
The Hope Street and the Esther Street, we've already kind of committed to those, so what were those
Yes.
project costs?
The one on Hope, we already have committed and it's completed. The one on Esther, I don't think we have committed, but it's not in yet. And I just want to make one point. The reason for this list, I wasn't thinking about, like, for example, take the historic West Side Stormwater Master Plan. The cost may be $9 million. I wasn't thinking about having the $9 million out of this. If you say this is a top priority, I was going to come back to you on the next commission meeting and use some figures for each item that you think it's important to make up the $10 million.
Right.
Because the historic West Side and the Coburn Park, we have the backup of the stormwater utility fee to cover some of the costs there. Talking about the Old Fort Park and the Women's Club, we already have the funding from the state. They're already, right now, they're under design. I think one of them is 90% and the other one is probably 60, 70%. So we are moving on these two projects to complete. We want to complete them. It's a historic, important projects for us. We want to get that out of the list. But if you just give me the lists in terms of the priority for the commission, I could come back to you with some specific fund for each one, not necessarily to have the complete number for each one, but maybe some of the funding to initiate the project. So.
Right, and that was a point I was trying to make, is we already have projects in the works. I'd like to see those projects through completion so that we can check that box off, get that off our list, and move forward. So Washington Street, the Corbin Park, Historic West Side. We have personnel issues. We were mandated by the state to increase hourly rates. So, you know, we need to work towards that goal to get us where we need to be in the next 2 years. The septic to sewer, you know, the resurfacing. These are projects that we already have committed to and are a funding source that takes out of our budget every year. So I'd like to work on those items. Those are my priorities, would be the things that we already have in the works. Canal Street improvements, Flagler Street improvements, those should all be budget items or budget issues through the regular budget cycle. I'd like to see us get some of these other bigger projects started and moving forward, as opposed to, you know, just spending a little bit here, a little bit there, and then, you know, pushing it off. And some of these things have been 6, 8, 10 years. And Commissioner McGurk, you know, how long have we talked about resurfacing, you know? So some of these items I'd really like to see us focus on going forward. However best you can figure out to get some of this started, or what we truly need. I would assume that with these stormwater projects, we could also look for grants and funds elsewhere as the project gets started, but we need that upfront money. We need the matching money. So if we can identify that as a matching money for those projects, maybe next year, you know, through St. John's, get some grants or something that would free that money up for a future project down the road.
And Commissioner Hartman, on the grant writer, that's a position that it's been approved. We advertised, and I think we're just struggling to find someone. I think we had someone that we were supposed to be interviewed. They backed out. Now we have another person that I think that HR trying to reach out to. So we've been looking for someone for the last 5, 6 months.
I know that and I understand, but I think that's an important part of everything on this list. I think there could be money out there that we could find elsewhere to help as a funding source going forward, and that should be a key item. So, again, the Esther Street generator and the Hope, do you know how much those two projects are going to cost?
I think the Esther Street, we had, for the construction was 100 and probably 40,000, and we paid the utilities about 45. So overall, probably I would say less than 200,000. And I think the generator for Esther, I want to say 80, what is David? About 80,000? About 80, 90,000. So overall, it shouldn't be more than, I would say, 350,000.
Yeah. So that money's already gone, so, okay.
All right. So I don't disagree with anything my colleagues have said. What I think I hear us kind of coming around is this notion of let's try to maintain and invest in and finish up what we already have today before we start trying to do new. If I can sum up what I've heard from, I think, most of you. You know, I want to make a couple of comments, not anything I haven't said before, but, you know, to me, I hope we can use this as a little bit of maybe a wake-up call / reconciliation. To me, this is a chance to maybe catch up. You know, one thing I think I've observed is a couple of things. We oftentimes have residents that come up and speak to, and they're not wrong in doing so, but they speak to programs or things that they would like to have that exist in other communities. So they want the quality of life of the program from Winter Park, but they want that on New Smyrna's property tax rate and property values. And we don't have that magic wand. We can't make that happen. We can't provide Winter Park level of quality of life and services on New Smyrna's property tax rate and property values. So I think what we have done, when you look at our historical tax rate, we have tried, you know, when you look at our, and I'm going to use Winter Park a lot, not that I'm trying to be Winter Park, but I hear them often mentioned a lot in context with us. So when you look at their property tax rate over like the past 15 or 20 years, it has been exactly flat. Their millage has not changed at all. It is slightly above ours. I mean, I say slightly, enough that it makes a material difference, but it is above ours, but it has been basically flat. Ours has kind of been, you know, we've gone up and then we kind of bring it down and try to get rollback and then we go up and then we, so I think we have been seeking this equilibrium constantly with this kind of downward pressure, but yet balancing the harsh reality that we don't have a high enough tax rate to sustain what we have today. Prime example is resurfacing budget. We had a consultant do a complete study and tell us we need a budget of 1-point-something million per year. I forget the number, 1.2 million, I want to say, per year. That's what it would take to just keep all of our roads at a certain condition level over time. That was the annual investment. At that point, this commission was able to increase the budget from $250 a year we were spending up to, I think, $750 a year. Nowhere near, we're still, you know, let's call it among friends, about half of what we should be just to maintain the existing streets and surfaces we have today, to make sure they're not falling further and further into disrepair. So it's one example of a case where we're talking about new things we want to have. And trust me, nothing would make me happier than to sit up here and say, and be talking about what new shiny thing we're going to bring out of the ground. That's what I would love to do. But I think the reality we have to face is we're not even keeping up with what we have today. At the current tax rate, at the current property tax values, we're not keeping up with what we have today. I think resurfacing is a good example. Our personnel budgets are another good example. I contend, and I have for a while, it's the biggest challenge facing our city. We're not unique in that. It's the biggest challenge facing a lot of organizations, but it's certainly the biggest challenge facing our city. I believe not only are we, I think, going to struggle if we can't invest more in our personnel across many, many departments, probably all departments. Not only that, but I've said before, I think we're staffed for status quo, but we're not living in status quo. We're living in a time in New Smyrna of evolution. Love it or hate it, that's the reality. And yet, I don't think we're staffed for that. I think we're staffed for this very static time, and yet we need people. I mean, some of the ideas I've heard from the public over the past few weeks. Hey, what if we had somebody focused on this? What if we had somebody focused on that? Those are all great things, probably things we should have as an evolving city, but I don't have the budget. What position would you like to cut? Where should we find that money? We don't have that operating budget to do that. Or if we do, someone needs to give me a jingle and tell me where it's at. So I think I think the opportunity is this. This is one-time funding that should be invested to try to play catch-up on some key items. Get our streets to a certain spot. Get some of these projects that we've been talking about for a little while. This to me is almost like in your personal budget, you get a nice bonus, and all of a sudden you get a chance to do all those things around the house that you've been meaning to do. That if you don't do now, they're going to end up costing you more money, like a roof repair. You don't replace your roof, that costs you more money over time. Let's get us back to a steady state. But that has to come with a commitment from this commission, from our public, that we are also going to find the right equilibrium of tax rate for our city. And if we don't do that, then we're just going to keep passing this problem down to generation to generation. So I see things on here I would love to do. I've been the biggest proponent for wanting new recreational facilities out out west. I don't think we should do that with this money. I think we can maybe come to taxpayers and say, do we want to put a bond out or something like that for that? Let the taxpayers vote directly on that if it's a big enough item, but I can't support that out of this. The other one, so septic to sewer, those projects get really, really expensive really quick, and I'd love to see the data. Everything I've read says that stormwater runoff has a much, much greater impact on the health and quality of our water systems in the lagoon than septic to sewer at the levels that we're talking about, at the exposure that we're talking about. So, that's a massive infrastructure project that I just would like to see the ROI, not from a financial, but the environmental ROI, if will. So I'd have trouble supporting that one. The others, the stormwater master plans, we've got to do it. The resurfacing, the personnel, the same approach, kind of what Commissioner Colodi said. I think we do have a chance to, if we have that commitment that we're going to address this in the general fund, to Vice Mayor's point, if we have the commitment and the fortitude to address it in the general fund, we could use this through some one-time adjustments or even some permanent adjustments to address some personnel issues, acknowledging that we're going to have to pair that with general fund income, AKA tax rate increase. I mean, or we take all this off the table and we say, this is what it is. When piers are broken, we're not going to fix them. When you call me about a street resurfacing, we're going to say it's on the list and we'll get to it 5 years from now. When we talk about other things, that's kind of where I'm at. Is we can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't have the lowest millage rate in Volusia County, one of the lowest millage rates across the state when you look at cities comparable to ours, cities that I hear us mentioned a lot of times in the same context. We can't have that and then also have this constant parade of, but we want all these super nice things and we want everything polished and clean and perfect, and we want well-funded public safety and we want all these other things. I don't think we're there, and I think that's the conversation that has to be had, and that's bigger than today. We're obviously not addressing all that today. So where I'm at today and where I think I heard the rest of these folks are, some direction for staff would be the things that are already in progress, that they're more shovel ready. We've been talking about them for a while. They clear some kind of a backlog or a deferred maintenance type item. Let's play catch up. Let's invest in those. There are some, the skate park is an embarrassment. I mean, I'm at a point we either need to close it or invest in it. It's that. I stop by there occasionally. There's a mosquito, bed in the water fountain. I mean, it's an absolute embarrassment. And so, I do question at some point. It feels like sometimes we do nothing until we can do everything. And I get that. I get to that same point on some of my projects. It's like, all right, I'm going to stop fixing this car. I'm just going to buy a new car eventually. But, feels like $150 we could get a water fountain running. And that might buy us some time. So again, that's where I'm at. I don't disagree on the grant stuff. I think there are, I think we've done much better at getting state funding and some grants. We have funded that grant position. I can't I can't manifest a grant writer. We have to go find one. If you know anybody, send them our way. We are hiring. But everybody else is too. I mean, so that's the challenge, is that's an in-demand position. So, but, you know, are there opportunities to possibly lobby a little bit more and get more help from the state on some of these bigger items? You know, probably. So when it comes to other things like Canal Street improvements, Flagler improvements, I've said for a while, again, I think we could get, you know, Jay, to your point, yeah, we need more than flower pots, but you can do a little bit, back to my water cooler comment, you can do a little bit with the budget we have. We can make it look as good as possible. And then we have to have a plan and a strategy for putting in a parking garage. If that's the will of the public and the commission, that's going to take a whole strategy. And what I don't want to do is, I don't, as a taxpayer, necessarily want to pay for that. I'll be honest. You know, I'd love to have some other plan than that coming out of my tax dollars. Or if it is, I want to understand why I should do that as a taxpayer. So that's where I'm at.
Well said.
Do we want to?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And this is a question for Khaled also. I'm not ready to burn a hole in my pocket and spend $14 million. I just wonder, how much of this money can be saved and set away for a rainy day?
None. It's got to be spent.
Okay, all has to be
It's got to be spent by 2026. I had that same
I see
question
that.
earlier. Yeah.
Now I see that. Or it goes away.
If you look at the staff
So-
reports, Commissioner, I mentioned that in the beginning of the staff reports. It has to be earmarked by 24, but it has to be spent by 26, and that's December 26, and also December of 2024, where it has to be earmarked. So it's not like you could just put it aside and say, hey, you know, I want to put it for a rainy day, you know, after 10 years. This has to be spent by 26.
Okay, that's fine. You know, again, looking at the list, agreeing in part with my colleagues' remarks, these items seem like things we should be doing anyway, and that there may be funding already for some of them. I wonder if that $14 million can be used to supplant or add on to and complete the funding for some of those projects, so that we're not hasty with that money, even though we have a timeline, that we don't just dump it on, you know, like that shiny new object that the mayor was talking about. I really see a lot of deficiencies in our infrastructure. It's an old city, and, you know, you can see it in the streets, you can see it in the sidewalks. Those are important to me. And, you know, they come with legacy costs as well. The legacy is we have to keep maintaining them. And I think we've kind of lagged behind there. Personnel, definitely a legacy cost there. But to me, it's just as important to have people well paid that want to work on the infrastructure. And so we added, just a sidebar, we added a ambulance on there. We already have impact fees, fire impact fees for an ambulance. So I can see some, again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this list, thinking that we could fund them or start funding them with other monies and not be so hasty. Again, I do see the timeline, but, you know, I wonder where we should start. I agree with the mayor. Stormwater is a major issue, and that's a quality of life issue. And the Indian River's not doing too well. And if we work on that stormwater, we can do something with that. And again, personnel, stormwater, number 1 and 2, everything else I'd like to see us work on, but there's other funding other than the $14 million for it.
Commissioner Colodi.
Yeah, just taking from what the other commissioners have said, my own thoughts. There are 2 items on here that fall into that new project category. We've certainly talked about septic to sewer forever, and we've done really virtually nothing. We did a little study that picked out an area where the money could be spent. The the one that was mentioned by Commissioner Hartman, to me, would be the first thing to do. And if we're going to commit to septic to sewer, we should really get going on it. We should put a lot of money into it. I myself would not put it ahead of the other projects, but it's extremely important. Of all the items I listed, I had the most money to go there. So if we don't want to go there, which is the sense of what I'm hearing, that means more money for the other categories. We have to spend this money. We can't talk forever. We got to set our priorities and do it. So if it's the consensus of everybody sitting up here, I think we could forget the septic to sewer at this particular time. The second item is the sports complex west of 95. That's, I think the way it's listed here is kind of, it doesn't present the problems we have with recreation in the proper light. We just spent a lot of money. We got a master plan that says where we should spend some money, where we should concentrate. Just give you an idea of what we're faced with. If we did everything in that report, it would be $81 million. We're not going to do it. But in this particular area, we have a lot of residents that live anywhere from Venetian Bay down into coastal woods, which we've provided nothing in the way of recreation to them. The report tried to paint the picture a little better by saying we have all these semi-private recreational facilities, golf courses. You ever try to get on a golf course if you're not a member? It's not a recreational facility for everyone. So I would consider looking into improving that condition, to put in some general parks out there. I don't know if we're even in the position to fund that right now because of the timelines that have been set for us. I myself am going to put forth a recommendation to the commission. We redo our land development ordinance, so whenever we do a PUD, the next big project out there, they have to set aside at least 10% of their good lands for recreation. So it doesn't cost us anything to change that plan. There'll be a lot of complaints from the developers who make money, but I would like to go in that direction. As to the rest of these projects on here, I'm pretty adamant about the bonuses for personnel. The other projects tend to fall into categories. West Side Drainage Plan, Stormwater, Corbin Park, Master Plan, Stormwater General Master Plan. That's one category. I think we should take our $15 million and set aside one big chunk of that and ask our manager to find the best way to improve it. Another one, resurfacing. As an engineer who designed projects and did resurfacing for his entire life, you hire a consultant, they say how much more you should spend. Yet, if you ride around most of our roads, they're in pretty damn good shape, and they have a lot of expected life. We are behind. I would like to see some monies dedicated to that, but it's not a crisis. We should up the amount of money. If we can give it a one-shot deal, that's good. I don't know if anybody remembers, but our last financial crisis we had, I forget which president it was, he said, we got to come up with these projects to help out our citizens who are all out of work. And what they did is they repaved half of the country. All that did is make paving companies rich, because that money, a paving project is 95% material, 5% labor. So it doesn't help out the citizens in that regard. Gets you nice shiny roads though. Canal Street and Flagler Avenue improvements kind of fall into a category by themselves and should be considered. I think we've been behind in funding improvements to those areas. Maintenance is okay, yet if Flagler Avenue is very self-supporting because of the nature of the people who come and use it. They're all tourists, they gotta go somewhere. Canal Street, I think, is tenuous at best. I don't know if everybody remembers the last recession, but about 80% of the stores were vacant. I think we have to do something significant to improve the sustainability of that over a long period of time. I would put funds into major improvements. I wouldn't do a parking garage. Parking garage is like putting a subway in New York City. It's nice to have, people use it, it's important, but it sucks you dry money-wise. They're very expensive, the maintenance, construction costs. Not in favor of that. I am in favor of parking improvements. New Smyrna Beach, to get out of the last recession, they made changes. If you put in a new business in any of those parking districts, you only have to put in half the amount of parking that the codes say you require. The Arts District, which is Canal Street and half the area around it, you don't have to put any in. We have to pay that price at some point. We've had all people come in, do improvements, and they haven't paid for the necessary parking. They all come to us and say, fix my parking. We got to change, it's a little bit off the subject, but we got to fix that standard so people who are making the money pay the price for it. Right now, that's not the way it is. So if we can, to summarize what I said, if I can, there's just a couple categories I would like to set amounts into as to where we should spend the money. And we got deadlines, and we really got to get the show on the road, so I'm all for it.
One thing he said reminded me, again, this isn't necessarily directly for this, but I think moving forward, we have a lot of parks that maybe I just drive by at all the wrong times, but I rarely see folks in a lot of these kind of one-off parks that we have. And then we have a few parks that you always see someone in. You know, the Riverside Park right here, always someone there. The skate park, actually, if it's open, there's always someone there. You know, there's a few parks like that, but then I drive by a lot of other parks. Rocco Park, Buena Vista Park, a lot of parks where we have a lot, you know, decent amount of infrastructure that we're maintaining, we're constantly replacing because we live near an ocean, and I just don't know if we're getting the bang from the buck. I would rather see us, you know, I'm willing to drive. I mean, many times, frankly, we drive to Edgewater to go to Whistle Stop Park because that's the nicest park in our region at this point. So I would rather see us, you know, maybe long-term, as some of these parks come up for renewal and refreshment, we say, do we really want to put new stuff back there, or do we just want to let that go back to, you know, go back to being a passive park and double down on our investment in parks like the 27th Avenue Park, Manatee Park, and pick a few others and really up our investment in those? Because again, I think if you create a bigger facility, so this, you know, this whole mini sports complex, maybe that's where the funding for that comes from, as we repurpose some of our existing parks renewal budgets and things and allocate it to that. I think that long-term is a more, and this will be long after my time, but I think that's long-term a more sustainable approach to have fewer but better facilities versus many small, tiny facilities. Because again, as a guy with young kids, like you show up to those kind of places, and after 20 minutes, the kids are like, all right, what next? What do we do now? And whereas you go to a place that actually has a lot of different things, you can kind of keep them engaged. So, and I think on our side, those are easier to maintain, easier to manage if you just have kind of one bigger facility versus, you know, having a lot spread across. So I think, is it fair to say, I think from the commission, what I've heard is pretty much consensus around investing in what we have today, or projects that are, you know, have been in the works for some time, making sure we kind of get those through shovel ready, kind of push those all the way through. Probably open to something in the personnel space. I think I heard a few of us say that. I know I am. We'll probably defer to staff a little bit, maybe give us an option on, here's how we can do it as a one-time bonus. Here's how we can do it as, if it's a reoccurring, obviously that's going to have to be paired with some other strategy. Didn't hear a lot of support for out of this money necessarily tackling septic to sewer. I don't think. Feel free, anybody, to jump in if you disagree.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think I'm a big proponent to septic to sewer.
Okay.
There is no body out there who's enforcing septic systems. They're put in to a standard, but there's no maintenance issues with these. This is where the state has let us down, in that there is no inspections go after the fact. And there's a lot of these systems out there, and especially the ones that are on the waterways or close to a waterway, that have not been maintained for years and years and years, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They were poorly designed to begin with, because for certain soil samples, not necessarily what we have here in the state in New Smyrna Beach. So I think the one project that was listed with the consultant was the Aqua Court, which I think would be an excellent opportunity to use that as a pilot program. I mean, we did this in Islesboro, and we've cleaned the water up in Islesboro, which is also part of the stormwater management. I mean, that all kind of tied together in that project with the reasonable assurance plan. We've taken the septics out of Islesboro. We've improved the stormwater. We're now improving the stormwater before we put it into the Indian River Lagoon. So it's a compounding effect. So I think this would be a great opportunity to have as a pilot program, another pilot program in New Smyrna, to see what those true costs end up being. And we could certainly do water quality samples before and water quality afterwards, 5 years from now, and see whether or not, you always talk about data. This is a perfect time to take a small little chunk, subdivision out there, street, and improve on our water quality in that area and see whether or not the data supports that or not. So I think this would be a great project. I'm not saying spend the entire amount on it, but certainly we've identified that. It's something that's probably doable in the next 2 or 3 years to get from design to construction. It's something that also I think the UC was supportive of. Remember, the UC is also a part of this entity. And these are projects that will help them also in the process if they need to upgrade a line or something to the entire area. So I certainly think that shouldn't be taken off the table. Yeah. But there should be some money allocated towards that project to see it through completion. It ties in with this stormwater master plan. I agree with Commissioner Colodi. Stormwater is stormwater, whether it's Corbin Park or West Side or the complete city, and we already have a fund set aside for that. So if we can set aside money to get some of these plans that we've already identified, we've already done construction drawings on, we know where the improvements are going to be, and get those projects completed, and then, fund them through the general fund. I'm comfortable with that,
Yeah.
But
So,
I would like to have city manager give us what's his 5 times.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. Here's what I think we probably can, because we got 14 items, 5 opinions. You do the math.
Well, you got 6 opinions because
the
city manager's been here over almost 30
I
years,
hear you.
so he knows what's been going on, what's not been going on, and where the issues are, and things that he's always had to deal with. I mean, he's got more longevity than any of us,
100%.
or all of us,
all of us combined. Probably
combined.
at this point, yeah.
So I would like to truly value his opinion on what does he think are the priority areas.
So here's what I would suggest is maybe one way to tackle this, and somebody, you can speak up if you have a better idea. But Colin, you've heard our input. You can go back and watch the tape. You've kind of got our input, where we're all at, and what we're passionate about. And obviously, you can call any one of us and say, clarity. Hey, what did you mean by this or whatever? Taking all of that, take each of these items and put together a proposal saying, okay, septic to sewer, I think we should spend X. Historic West Side, I think we should spend X, going all the way down the list. And some of them may be zero. I mean, broadband. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I didn't hear a lot of support for anything related to broadband. So you may put broadband 0. So putting together some kind of proposal as a starting spot with dollars and cents or percentages, however you want to approach it. And then bring that back to us, and then, remember that exercise we did one time where we had all the whiteboards, we all put the little dots on the whiteboards, I think it was a strategic workshop. We're probably gonna have to go through, rather than calling out each item and taking like a vote, that'll probably be, we gotta come up with some way where we can transparently do something to identify, okay, we're in agreement on these, but, maybe we tweak this or that. Acknowledging that if every one of us did this, we would come up with something slightly different. So we're all going to bend a little bit, and I agree with Commissioner Hartman. I'm going to defer a lot to, you've heard our vision. Now, within that context, your expertise and longevity to help us execute that and what you think is right for the city based on your experience. So how does that sit with you as an approach? Do you think you have enough information and feedback to do that, or?
I think I do. The list that you're talking about, I already have it.
Okay.
In terms of and I don't want to give you what I thought in terms of the funding for each one, because I don't want to be biased.
Yeah.
But I have the list already, so what I could do is at the next meeting or the meeting after, I could bring the list, I could give it to you in advance, and you could mark on your sheet 1 through 15, and then we could collect them, like what we've done on several of CIP projects.
Yep.
We could do that. The idea wasn't to take the whole amount from the ARPA fund for each one. So what I was thinking is, like say take for example septic to sewer. Back in almost mid-90s, they did a petition to have sewer in the neighborhood. One neighbor. And you have to have 51%. Well, obviously the cost drove that issue to be denied. So now what happened is if you provide some funding for it, I think that would push the petition to go forward. So if you say, I want to use X dollars for the septic to sewer, the total cost is say like it's going to be 1 million, and you're providing 300,000 or $500,000. So now you have the other $500,000, which probably will push people to go for it. So that's what I was thinking. But I would provide the list for you at the next meeting with the items and also the cost. And I will put it in terms of the staff priority. And then you could put it on your priority as well.
Yeah, I like that. And then if you did it ahead of time, then we could get it back to staff and they could have that in the agenda package. So again, I want that, because that's, to me, it's kind of a form of a vote. So I just want to make sure we're very transparent on that. So we could include that in the agenda package. Here's, like we've done before with the CIP, here's what each commissioner put, so that's out there available to the public.
You could send it back in advance, but then at the meeting, we could show it.
Compile it, exactly.
The mayor has, this is what's his list and so forth. But I think I hear you loud and clear in terms of what your priority is, and so I will give you what I think from the staff standpoint, and then we could come up to an agreement at the meeting in terms of the priority itself.
Okay. Commissioner Clute.
I've already done that, and I'm going to hand it to you as soon as we're done talking.
Okay.
But I do want to speak on just one particular issue, the septic to sewer. I agree completely that we should get the ball rolling in one particular neighborhood, and it's the one that consultant brought forward to us. After that meeting, I went out and I walked the entire neighborhood. I looked at the tributaries going into the water, and honestly, I didn't see any evidence that there's a problem with the septic systems out there. So what I would propose is that we allocate sufficient funds to do some true testing out there, other than just having a consultant look at the map and pick out what's a good area, that we should do a little bit of testing of the waterways, the subsurface conditions, a limited amount, budget enough, maybe $500,000, and that should tell us if that's a problem area or not. Because the project will be a many multi-million-dollar project, probably end up getting 80% of it funded by some state or federal agency. But until we go down that road, address the real issues and prepare for that as a real issue.
Okay.
A couple of comments, Mayor, I want to talk about. One being the septic to sewer. You know, it's been kind of interesting to watch how that has caught fire. And when we had the last presentation by our expert, I asked for some kind of information that measures, some measurable information to tell me what our septic tanks are actually contributing to in our estuary and lagoon system. It's like I was talking a foreign language, there is none. So as I watch millions of gallons of discharge put into either the East Coast or the West Coast of Florida by agriculture and big business, we fight it out like cats and dogs over one morsel of food on the ground. And to me, I feel like we're fighting over peanuts and the battleship is passing us on our backside. So I love the idea of actually getting some measurable information so we can know what we talk about. The funny thing about the environment is everyone is, excuse me, very passionate about it. But a lot of times we lack information. And I don't need to be an expert to know that when we have massive fish kills, they've dumped most of the ag runoff into the East Coast or the West Coast. There's direct correlations, we know that. We're not fighting over how we lobby our state representatives. We're fighting over 10, 15, 20 different things we need to do and how much money we should fund for a septic tank. And that's great and all, but I like the idea of getting information. But I also like the idea more of paying attention to, maybe we should start putting some of our efforts into what really affects measurably our ecosystems, lagoons, and estuaries. So I'm really hot on that issue, Commissioner Colodi. Let's get some measurements. Let's actually understand what we're talking about a little bit. And then I want to stress, you know, I see fire out here, a lot of fire people out here tonight or today. And I want to stress that I recognize the personnel issues across the board. I want to let you know I don't believe in taking a one-time piece of money and then trying to deal with employee wage issues. It's a bad policy, and it just keeps the same issues turning over year after year after year, whether it's fire, police, staff. That is something, talking to my commission now, that I think we have been long overdue dealing with. And Mayor, when you said we go up and down, and Winter Park stays flat, yeah. I mean, I've been here long enough to know that when the economy's up, we take money, we spread it out, and then when the economy goes down and the city has no money, we lose people, we ask for really deep concessions, and it just seems to be we operate in extremes. And I would love to get that nice, even consistency in terms of how we run the city on a financial perspective. So with that said, I don't want you all misinterpreting my desire to deal with personnel issues on a consistent basis, not just taking a one-time piece of money and kind of holding it out there for you guys, whether it's you, whether it's police, anybody. I think we just need to get a better grip long-term on how we deal with that. Thank you.
If you get a $2,000 bonus, you can't sign up to buy a new car with it just because you can afford the first 3 payments. That's I think what you're saying. Yeah.
On the issue of water quality, I heard some anecdotal evidence that septic to sewer is the third rail for everyone, for municipalities, for landowners. It's a big expense all around. But it turns out that the contribution of phosphates and nitrates, pollutants, is only like 4%. Most of the pollutant comes from stormwater. So I'd really love it for our city to get ahead of that game and look at all of these outfalls again. I know I'm repeating myself. Maybe later we can go back. I don't mind looking at the septic to sewer issue in some small areas, as Commissioner Hartman had suggested. You know, we have not tested the water. We have no data to go back on. For quite a few years, the county didn't even look at the waters of Spruce and Turnbull Creek. They didn't look at the water of Indian River down near Bethune and Silver Sands, which is a shame. And they're not cheap, those water studies. but they have to be done by someone to find out where we start, where's the baseline, what's immeasurable, how much it would cost us. I've never heard anybody besides myself talk about stormwater on South Beach. There's ample amounts that go into the river every time we have a major rain event. It doesn't stay in the street for long, it goes right into the river. So that's something I would like us to look at. These are all good items on the list. But again, the salary inequity, it seems like an inequity that I've been looking at ever since I've been sitting on the dais. I would, even if we had to dip into some of this money to even that out, to like the issue of compression and salary adjustment, and to keep us competitive to retain jobs. I wonder, you keep bringing up the fact that it's a legacy cost, true, but I wonder, can we use some of that money to just get a leg up, to be to a point where then every year we can comfortably look at raises and cost of living adjustments. Is it possible we could do that? I know you're adverse to that. I see where you're coming from. You know, you worry about the next year. We're going to have, you know, we're giving a nice raise this year. We're going to be able to keep doing that. I understand that argument, but it seems like this year it's really come to a head because of the cost of living, because the city's salaries are below par, in my opinion. So,
I think the challenge is, if I may, I think the challenge is, you know, again, I think no one would love more than to give a, you know, massive pay raise. Let's just make up a number. Let's say we gave it, you know, 10% pay raise. The problem is next year, you know, that if it comes out of ARPA this year, next year, we've got to come, you know, now they're still getting the 10%. You know, if somebody's salary goes from 50 to 60, every year from there forward, you're giving them 60K. We only have the money the one time. So again, back to my example of if you in your personal life, you get a one-time bonus of $2,000, but you sign up for a car payment, you make your first few payments fine because you got your $2,000, but then all of a sudden, if you don't get other income, in our case, our income is our general fund, our tax dollars, if we don't make other adjustments there, and that's what I'm challenging us as a city community commission to figure out is, I do think we're gonna have to increase our general fund to match a new funding level to pay for some of these things. But I think the concern is committing to that, you know, committing to permanent recurring expenses like a car payment without knowing for sure that your salary is going up, which in our case is millage. So, gentlemen, we're going till 12. I think I need a quick break if everybody else does. I think we've beat this issue pretty well. I know we've got a couple of other issues. So if everyone's okay, we'll call just a quick, 10-minute recess, come back at 10:40. But don't go too far because I don't want to waste too much time. Okay, let's get together back in here. All right. The next item on the agenda was the PUD park space. I think that was Commissioner Colodey. I heard you tease that earlier. Is that something you wanted to talk about?
Yes, and this is kind of a short discussion. It's one thing I think that we have problems we're dealing with now that were created 20 years ago by these things called PUDs. What it is, any large developer, and even a small in certain areas of our town, they have to get an approval for a PUD, which basically is a contract between the city and the developer as to what they have to put in and build. It can be changed only at the request of the developer, not at the request of the city. So what you end up with is over 20 years, time changes. We've become much more aware of our environment, our need for parks, none of which were in the PUDs. So I do have a meeting that's been requested by our planning director that's my background, engineering and planning, to discuss changes to our land development ordinance and our comprehensive plan that will require developers to set aside usable land that can be used for recreation. When I say recreation, I mean recreation can be an open field with nothing on it. It could be an open woodland. It could be a pickleball complex. Doesn't mean that they have to pay for it, but they got to set it aside. I'm willing to make concessions or to recommend concessions that would allow them to alter their plans to perhaps allow areas of density change that would compensate for the values they lose with the PUDs. So it will help the city in general over a long period of time and will not penalize anyone who wants to develop land and just help things out in general. And there are a number of little changes that would go along with that the staff has picked up along the way. And there's always something that I want to change that can be included in there. So that's it. It's more of an announcement as to specifics that will come in the future.
Okay, Commissioner Sacks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Commissioner Colodi. It's a novel, very worthy idea to have open space included in PUDs. What I would like us to define, and it's not clear for me and quite a few residents, is who actually develops and enforces an MDA, a Master Development Agreement. My question would be for Commissioner Colodi. Do you believe that open space in a PUD would have to be part of an MDA?
Yes.
Yes.
As to creating the space, each individual plan could set aside who has to maintain it, who has the rights to govern it and enforce it. We have situations such as out in Venetian Bay where, because the PUD was written in such a imprecise manner that we're arguing over what's supposed to be in it, and that's 20 years ago. So we got to try to tie that down. When I was on the planning board, we took a step. One step we took is they used to last 10 years. Now they only last 5 years in any new ones we write. The world's changing. As has been brought up here, we find ourselves deficit in any number of ways. We have to keep up with it, and we just can't have these documents that last forever when situations change. I come from elsewhere in the country, and basically what something like this was called a license to steal. It allowed the developers to change what they put in and get around particular things we had in the ordinance, which always happens. But here, we're locking ourselves into paying those prices forever. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did, but there's one part of the question that I can't seem to get answered. An MDA is an agreement between the municipality and the developer with the residents in mind where they can give input, or is it an agreement between the residents and the developer?
As the staff would tell you, it's before a single person buys a piece of property or sets foot on the tract. So they're living with the agreements that were set up prior to them being involved with the property, and they have to live with it.
And that agreement is between the city and the developer?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Sacks, just for clarification, you know, when you open up the land development regulations and we have our different zoning districts that have setbacks and all the regulations that pertain,
yes,
that MDA is the same as what you would find under for example, R3 zoning district. The MDA constitutes the zoning regulations for that piece of property. So you could just picture it in the LDR as a new category, a new zoning district.
So it's an agreement between the city and the developer, not necessarily the residents and the developer.
Correct, as to what the zoning regulations are on that property.
Yeah, or other things. I mean, I think what he's probably referencing is, other agreements like open space, community centers, those kind of things.
Yes.
That's all there. The residents may rely on that to say, just like you would if you bought a single-family house and next door was zoned single-family, you assume that there's going to be nothing more than a single-family house there.
Correct.
Okay.
And wouldn't that be a nice way to join with developers, perhaps, I don't know if I'm out of line or might be a correct statement, if the developer could provide the land in agreement with the city and the city could provide the amenities if they wished, like basketball courts or pickleball courts, if the land was set aside in that.
If memory serves me right, when we did Shell Point, they stipulated a larger recreational area and they would put in whatever amenities we requested to our standard, but we would maintain it after that fact. So the previous commission, I think, has taken those kind of steps. But you have to remember, smart growth 20 years ago is not the same thing that we think smart growth is today, which was in a lot of these PUDs that we dealt with was not necessarily done with this commission. It was done at a county level. So, as hopefully we learn from our mistakes and we learn from the mistakes of others, I think us and staff have done a great job in moving forward. So I would certainly encourage your recommendation. I could support that because I think that's, given what we know today as opposed to yesterday, I think that's an important fact going forward for some of these communities, our larger space. I think even some of the developers will tell you these pocket parks are more of a headache than they are, of a benefit to them, and they would much prefer one larger piece of tract of land that they would have to mow as opposed to sending a mowing crew to 20 or 30. So I think I can support your ideas and things, and I think that we've tried to do that in some of the things that we've done and learned. And like you said, we've learned that no longer leave these open-ended PUDs. There is a time limit on them, and they expire, and they have to come back and renew the entire agreement if they don't do something. So,
Go ahead. Just legal does have some additional research to do. Shay is primed up on this issue, but we have to worry about the exaction. So we get park impact fees, which is supposed to provide park amenities due to the increase in population. We have an open space requirement, and now if we add park requirement, we may be in violation of our the test about nexus. And go ahead, Shay.
So you would have to look to see whether there's an essential nexus and if it's roughly proportional to what you're asking. So is there an essential nexus between what you're extracting from the land for a legitimate public purpose, and is it proportional to what you're asking for, how much land they have, and is it proportional to that? And if you're asking for impact fees along with open space, along with park things, you might run afoul of your proportionality test.
So I wanted to point out, thank you, Shay, Randy started touching on it. These PUDs had a lot of things negotiated in it that 20 years ago everyone thought was important. I remember talking to the planners. I remember the issues. I remember what people wanted back then. So I'm all for what you're saying. The issue is we need to be a little more specific. When you say open space, we've been talking about open space for 30 years in developments. The question is, what do we want? And I can tell you 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, these little pocket parks and these were great. People wanted little small areas that they can leave from their house and walk their dog to, not big giant parks where people came from outside the community. And one of the things that we are missing tremendously is simple open fields. kids to play football, kids to play soccer, do normal things like that. So I'm all for what you're proposing. But the interesting thing is that over time, people, perceptions change, wants change. And I listened to, for example, the issue out in Venetian Bay where people were saying, well, there was something in the PUD, but we're not getting this. We don't want this, we want that. So how do we anticipate going forward 10, 20, 25 years from now what the need is? Now, the desire at that time, having PUDs that expire or have to be, looked at again after a certain amount of time. And that way you deal with changing trends. And that's the key. Things change. We can't do anything today that is going to last for 50 years. We know one thing, change always occurs. And change has occurred from what we're seeing now are smart growth strategies. We're clustering and higher densities to keep open space, whether it's 40% of the development or 60%. So we're seeing that, and we're seeing some of the problems with that. So going forward, I don't want to just say, let's have open space. We need to be more clear to staff on what exactly we're looking for, and then they know what to put in there. That's what I think we need to do going forward, be clear about what it is that we want to see in our, quote, open space. And whether that's clubs, HOAs.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Hartman said it well, and I've told the public before. Not to be woe is us, but we're dealing with the consequences of decisions made long before our time, and others will take credit for the work that we're doing today. That's the development timeline. That's just the nature of the development timeline. Is the good work that we're doing today is going to come out of the ground and be realized in projects, probably after most of our time involved in city government. But yet we're dealing right now with the consequences of things made long ago. That's why I do like this notion, you mentioned it, that our timeline has been shortened because, to your Vice Mayor's point, we don't know what 20 years from now is going to be the thing. So, putting that shorter timeline in these MDAs, PUDs, that gives us that ability, or gives future leadership that ability to make those adjustments as needed. All right. So I think that was it on that item. I think Commissioner Colodi is going to continue to kind of run with that.
Yes, staff has some very good ideas. Planning board's worked on it, and we just want to move ahead. And as you said, 10 years from now, people are going to appreciate what we did, and there's also going to be a group of people that are going to damn us for what we did. But life changes as you go on. In Venetian Bay, hundreds of acres were set aside for the environment. It's just that the human aspect was kind of left out of it, the daily use aspect. The lands were set aside, which was tremendous. But still, things change. So.
But they have a huge park, open space with baseball fields, but they provided no parking or no access points to it. So, we've got to be holistic about this whole approach.
Yeah. We do, and each PUD will be different. Right. Because the needs for a PUD on 44 will be different than needs for a PUD on Pioneer Trail. Yeah. So.
And that does remind me, Colin and others, I saw something, I was looking at some report, and the amount of space in New Smyrna, and even Volusia County, but in New Smyrna, that has been allocated as conservation, some variant of conservation that will not be developed. The one positive of this old form of smart growth was, it truly was about this kind of higher density clustering, but there are hundreds of acres that are now in preservation. And unfortunately, I think we see the tree that's cut down. We don't notice the hundreds that are now protected forever. So there's probably an opportunity for us to do some good PR around that statistic between the Turnbull project that we've done and then the PUDs that that have the conservation, reporting on out of our 49 square miles or whatever that number is. We have out of that total number of that, we have this amount that is in conservation, will not be touched, will not be developed. I'd love to see that and see if we could just start kind of pushing that, because I think people don't see that, especially as you have the commercial corridor of 44 being built out, which was always the vision. I mean, not necessarily everyone in the city is happy about it, but I think everybody, the zoning certainly indicated that was always the vision, is it's a commercial corridor. And so as you see that very visible impact, even though it's 2 or 3 acres, you see that very visible impact of development. What's missed or what's lost is all of the unseen, development that has been stopped in some ways. It's not like we're going to cover every square inch of New Smyrna Beach with concrete, which is what some folks believe or at least right on next door. So I'm told. I don't read it. All right. The last item is general discussion. We're going to kind of blend this with commission comments. So we got about an hour left of this meeting. We don't have to take it all, just so you know. We have about an hour. So this is your chance if you had anything else that was on your mind just for general discussion. Oftentimes we're in a commission meeting, we get to commission comments, it's 10 o'clock at night, we breeze over something. But this is your chance if you had something else. For this one, I'm going to start on this end if it's okay, and we'll work that way since we always start there. So we'll start with Commissioner Hartman, and we can go back and forth, but we'll start with you.
So I have 2 issues that I want to kind of just bring up for discussion and see if it goes any further. The first is annexations. We've recently re-agreed to the ISBA, which calls for voluntary annexations. But what we've done over the years is we've created a lot of little pocket areas. Either they're completely enclosed by city limits in Still County or on 3 sides or something like that. So what I would like to do moving forward is staff has submitted a list. There's about 95 residents or addresses that are either on 3 sides or completely enclosed by the city. And I think going forward, we should make a concerted effort to maybe contact those people and say, hey, we have this program in place, voluntary annexation. We'd like for you to think about it. And maybe if we can't get those enclosed, because I know that these areas, they're scattered throughout the city, but a lot of them are in the core area of the historic West Side in Corbin Park area. And they create problems for fire and police. Is this truly, is this a city resident or is this a county resident? Fire not so much because, of the joint agreement. They're going to respond anywhere, regardless of whether it's this or the other. But for some instances, it may make an instance for legal issues. Was this a sheriff's department should do the reporting process? Or can New Smyrna Beach do the report, take the initial report? So I think those little pocket areas, it also comes to deal with staff. When staff goes out there, well, let me get the map. Is this a county resident or a city resident? Especially with what we just agreed to with the ISBA, where code enforcement is now going to go back to the county for enforcement. Code enforcement staff are going to go, let me find a map. Is this, how accurate is the map? Is this a county? Do I do this or do I have to refer it to the county? So I think if we make a concerted effort in the next couple of months we've identified those projects. Lonnie's done a good job in identifying those projects, and we can share the list. They gave it to me, so we can share it with everybody else if everybody's a consensus with this. That moving forward, we should try to make some concerted effort. I've been doing door hangers ever since I got elected on little pocket areas I know specifically about. But if we as a city can go forward, and then if we don't get a lot of traction in that, at some point in time, we're going to have to think about forced annexation. We're going to have to take those steps to say, look, we have to clean up our boundary lines. And we have to do that with these little pieces, parts, the holes. There may be one resident in an entire street that is still a county resident, and it's time-consuming and problematic, I think, for us and for staff. So we need to think about going forward. So if there's a consensus with that, would like to ask staff if we can work towards that. We've identified them. If we can do a mailer out to them or something of that nature, see if they will voluntarily annex in, and then if not, then what's our next step after that project?
Does the 95, that number's lower, honestly, than what I would have anticipated. Is that kind of that whole, we can all picture the map, right? You've got kind of that hole in the donut, and then you've got, South Beach, Silver Sands. Is that kind of the
He
whole hole in the
looked
donut?
specifically at properties that were completely encompassed by city residents.
I gotcha, okay.
And/or on three sides.
I gotcha.
So,
So that's not necessarily that whole hole in the donut
no, like if
in the
there's two
middle.
or three houses that are county residents, then city residents, he didn't necessarily look at those. It was just a single address that was either completely encompassed or
I
on
gotcha.
three sides.
Okay, that makes more sense. This is, you and I probably couldn't agree on an issue more than this one. I'm totally supportive, happy to do whatever I can do to help. I'm actually at a point on the I don't want to use the word forced annexation. We got to come up with a better marketing term than that. But this idea of having that be a legislated annexation type approach, that's where because the problem is we start with these 95. Well, then that creates another 95 because now all of a sudden we've hit the next two properties. Well, now there's two more that now are encompassed on three sides. So, I would love to but no one has been able to explain to me, and so maybe we start with, and I know our legal staff is spread thin, but I would love to just understand what that process is for that legislative process. Like who signs off on that? Is it us? Is it them? Is it the governor? Is it the president? Who's involved? What is steps 1, 2, 3 to start that process? And if that's simple, maybe that's the easier way to go about it. I don't know.
So I agree 100%. I like the idea. I think we include everybody, not just those who we've created. There's a donut. And you talk about Silver Sands and Bethune. I continuously meet new people almost every week that tell me, I live out there, I want to be in the city. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know the reasons why it's been so cantankerous over the decades to do South Beach. However, I have my theories. And I think that one of the approaches that we do is if we commit a staff member to getting out there and being the contact person for anybody to reach out to. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think a lot of that misinformation has been intentional over the decades. And we have to, the first step I would think is reaching out to these people and saying, what is your concern? And then we build basically some sort of understanding of what their concerns are out there. And I believe almost all of their concerns are either completely incorrect or very incorrect. And as we start an educational process, we have a person contact this person. They can go over all of your concerns with you. They can give you the facts. And that's, to me, one of the ways that we start this process. It doesn't have to be this only. It could be a couple parallel lines, but a key person to give people facts. Work with the HOAs, work with the individuals. And, I can tell you that, there's a lot of areas where 1 or 2 homes in a neighborhood or a street, it has been annexed into the city. And then the rest of them are not. So I think we should start including everybody on that. And we go with an understanding and then educating process.
I don't have a problem with that, but my concern is if you start taking large chunks of neighborhoods, you may get some pushback at the county level. So I don't think there's no reason why anybody who's completely surrounded, by city residents, why anybody would, I don't understand why they wouldn't annex in. It's cheaper for them to be annexed in. So I think that educational point, we need to start somewhere. And to me, this was the easy place to start. And I agree with you. I think legislatively, however we do that, we just need to square off our boundaries and be done with it. But that's kind of a harder pill to sell sometimes than it is individual lots here and there to kind of at least get that started. The other issue that you know, we have to think about if once 51% of a street comes in, now we have to take the street from the county. So, you know, those are things that we also have to deal with. But there's one house on Magnolia, you know, that's completely surrounded by city residents. I've left door hangers on that door 100 times, you know, well, maybe not 100, but, you know, and Bob has done a great job. Annually, Bob comes up with a letter that says, you know, here's the benefits to it, you know, here's the contact person, you know, here's some things to consider. And where trash used to be a benefit, you know, because you would get twice weekly trash service, we've taken over those areas anyway, according to the ISBA. Yeah. So we're already committed to those areas. We're committed, police and fire, to those areas. So, I mean, we might as well include the benefit of collecting their tax dollars, collecting their stormwater dollars to go to our stormwater funds, you know, because we're looking at improving West Side and Corbin Park stormwater management, and a lot of that is the county. Yeah. The county has no interest because they know at some point, I can't speak for them, but, you know, they know at some point it's going to happen, so, you know, they may be reluctant to spend big dollars on projects like that, you know, knowing that at some point in time. And I was hoping with the expiration of the ISBA, then, you know, we could kind of fast track this, but we've agreed to move it on for another 5 years. So, you know, to me, this is the quick, simple way to do it, is that we've targeted those residents that are completely encompassed or on 3 sides. You know, let's reach out to them, see what they want to do.
Okay. My favorite, to your point, Vice Mayor, is someone, I promise you, they lived South Beach. It's like, why wouldn't you annex into the county? I want to be able to shoot my gun. And I'm in the county, I can shoot my gun. Yep. It's like, you cannot shoot your gun where you live. Please do not do that. But tons of misinformation. But they genuinely believe they can just step out on their balcony and pop off a few rounds, I guess. I don't know.
That's right.
Any objection to or anything to add on this, Commissioner Colodi?
No, I agree with the idea completely. I do think that it shouldn't be limited to 95. It should be limited to the people who have recently become getting their trash picked up by us, because they can see the writing on the wall, knowing that it's going to go in that direction. And that's a good target group, because they understand there's a difference between county and the city. And so I'm all for that, but I just want to say that we have a proposed development coming up on Route 44 that a lot of residents are really, really upset about. And when I looked at all my emails, I started looking at the address, and they all live in the county, and they're appearing here. You know, really, they belong in the city if they we're open to the public. So we got to listen to them, but really, we're here to serve the residents, and that's the way it should be. So I originally opposed a couple of years ago allowing people to basically avoid the fees and the signing in the city. That was a mistake. The approach we have now is much better, and we should continue to deal with the annexations. South Beach is another story. That's got to be handled separately. The main issue they seem to have down there is the short-term rentals, and guaranteed you're going to send out a letter and you're going to get a 50-50 response. So concentrate within and then look elsewhere.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think we, again, should look at the Silver Sands area. There may be some outlying properties that would like to annex in for 2 reasons. They're concerned about water quality. They would like to get off their septic tanks. They would like to see stormwater controls. So I would hope that staff would go back again. The political winds have changed. I think people's minds have changed towards the city, hopefully. A lot of benefit towards annexing into the city. And that's an area that concerns me, because I know the residents want it. I don't know how many, but I think it's worth a look, and I know that it's in very close proximity to the Webster Creek area. You know, these are really substantial water bodies. The other the donut hole, another donut hole, the old Zone 2 out by Josephine, back behind the high school. There seems to be a big donut hole there of county properties, which I'll bet there's a few people at least that would like to annex in, hopefully. So, you know, the mayor has talked about that donut hole quite a bit. Would like to oblige him and get those properties in somehow and show them the benefits of what it's like to live in the city. I just have one other comment. We've been sitting on the Turnbull Creek property, the largest property on the north end of the creek. I would like to see some funds just dedicated for a trail to get started so we can show the residents what they bought, so they can gain access, possibly using, I forgot the name of the park next to it. But there is access to the...
Commissioner, hang
Yes.
on 1 minute. Let me just, I want to defer to Commissioner Hartman. We were talking about annexation specifically. I'm going to come back to him with his time, and then you can bring that up under your time. That sounds like a separate issue. So I think you got our feedback. No objections. I think we're all supportive.
So the other thing I wanted to bring up, and there's been a lot of discussion already about it, is personnel. I talked a lot about personnel issues this morning, keeping in mind that the 5 of us have 3 personnel. There's 3 people that we're responsible for. We hire, we fire. And I think, given that it's in the charter that we are supposed to be doing evaluations on them, we've kind of indicated that this would be the time of the month to do those evaluations so that going into the budget cycle, we could do something about that. Next commission meeting, I think the city manager has his mini budget presentation. I think now's the time maybe to have an open and active conversation about what are we going to do about our 3 people? Are we going to include them in the group? Are we going to look at something? I've seen some other cities, counties do bonus programs, you know, where they're entitled to a bonus if they meet certain criteria. We've talked about, and I think we've had the discussion at the last meeting, where we're hiring supervisors or staff people at a higher rate than what we thought we had to, and we now are compressing our people. And given the opportunities that with this market, my concern is, I think we've hired some really good people. I'd like to keep those people. I don't want them to be in a position where, you know, inflation, my dollars, you know, I have less money in my pocket. Is it time for me to look? You know, I have a friend who had a nurse work for 20 years in the emergency room, left because they can go per diem right next door and make triple what they were making before. So there's a lot of budgetary issues and things that going forward that I think that we as a commission need to look at. I think, and to the mayor's point is, if we look at salary increases, we look at long-term, because that's something that you can't go back on. So do we want to consider bonus programs? You know, is there a bonus program that we should look at to establish for those 3 people, you know, before our fiscal year begins, at a budget cycle, because we're going to have those discussions. So do we want to look at that? There's also something that comes to mind when we review those contracts is the termination clause. We can terminate them for cause, or we can terminate them because we feel like it. And it only takes 3 of us to do that. And we witnessed that just recently with the school board. And given our uniqueness in that 3 of us are elected every 2 years, I mean, that could give, to me, that would get, if I was one of those 3, it would give me some concerns about every 2 years, you know, what's my job fate? I would like to see us go back and look at maybe doing a supermajority vote on terminations without cause. That way, we're all, you know, the 5 that are up here sitting at this dais are committed to it's time for a change, and the change needs to go forward. I mean, we did that in the charter with selling public lands. The commission, this Utilities Commission does it on several items. I think that's an important factor for us. It certainly would give our staff some ease and, you know, some security in that as long as I'm doing my job and I'm doing it efficiency, I'm being evaluated by the 5 of us, you know, I have that, some reasonable assurance that, you know, it's going to take 4 out of 5 just on a whim. One of the things that was interesting about the last one was, I don't know if you followed it, but it's curious is that I think the severance package was more than if they just let him play out his contract. So, I mean, spending years negotiating contracts for public employees, I'm going, look, I think I'll get fired my last year because I'll make more, you know, in that time period than I would if I just retired out. So I think there's a lot of things to play with that, and there's a lot of things that we need to consider. When we hired those, it was pretty much we hired all 3 at the same time, within a few months of each other. I think we've had some history now, and I think there's certainly a level of confidence in their abilities. So I think that would be, you know, as an encouragement to them, we're going to reward them. We're going to, you know, look at these things and certainly say, hey, we support you, we have your back.
Okay. Comments on that? I don't disagree. I'm open to having that conversation. I'll defer to staff as to when the right time is, whether it be the workshop or the next meeting, because the budget workshop's before the actual meeting. But you bring up a point with the reviews that it is something with COVID that I think we kind of let our eye off the ball a little bit. I know I've done the reviews. I don't know. I'm trying to remember the last. There may have been a year missed, but I know I've done annual reviews, but I don't know if everyone has. That isn't something we've necessarily had a really solid process on. So we probably should improve that, and that was on my mind.
It's required in charter.
I know. But my challenge is, and you know, maybe to HR, who isn't here anymore, but you know, I think we probably need some, like, I'm going to forget. I mean, it's not necessarily on the top of my mind. So we need some prompting, you know, to say, hey, you know, this is it. It's due by this time. You know, some follow up. You know, to make sure that we're doing that, whether or not it's an agenda item or whether or not we're just doing it. To me, first of all, I've always said there should be no surprises in an annual review. I mean, that's a disservice to an employee if they get a massive surprise in an annual review process. I've told every one of our people that report to us, you know, if I have an issue with something, you're going to know it long before I'm talking about it up here or long before I'm documenting it in an annual review. Like, we're going to have some preliminary conversations kind of heading it off at the pass before I document it. But long and short is we need to codify that annual review process. And then I agree with everything else you said. You know, on the termination clause, that was one thing, you know, we had addressed in 2 out of the 3 contracts that we negotiated, this commission specifically, was getting rid of those, because that's what I recognize is, you know, the last year you just sit down and say, you know, hey, I'm better off getting fired. So we don't have that in 2 out of the 3 contracts. Instead, it's more of an enhancement. It's kind of a longevity play. The longer they're here, the better off it is for them. You know, and Kelly specifically, I can't remember Khaled's because it's a little different because he's closer to retirement. But in Kelly specifically, that termination clause fell off, and it was the ramp up was more retirement, you know, more funding for her retirement account. So she's at a point now. I just actually pinged HR the other day. There was just another adjustment made that bumped up. So the longer she's here, the better off it is for her. But we're not putting this or any future commission in a spot where, you know, to get rid of a person cost, you know, so much that you end up sticking with it. Not that Kelly's in that conversation at all, but I'm just saying. But I like the supermajority concept, actually.
Okay.
Any opposition to just having that discussion at the next time, or any comments you want to make now? Go ahead.
I have no opposition to having that discussion. You know, I've never been a fan of reviews because in the private sector, your entire workforce, including the entire general public, doesn't get to be part of that discussion. So it's just maybe something I'm not used to. I know in your field, it's the exact opposite. You're so used to that. What I don't like about that is every year it gives the ability, because we're elected, for people to come at us with an agenda and they threaten our own well-being in terms of our electability in the future. So I would like to think that we all have a higher moral compass in that. But the reality of politics is it's not uncommon for people to put themselves ahead of someone else. Reviews we picked up in the charter. I could agree with the supermajority. I think what happened at the school board was a great example of politics that went too far, losing a good person. So since we have the reviews in the charter, and if we start doing them consistently, I like the supermajority. However, I will tell you that the reason we have 3 electeds come up each 2 years is just so the people can remove a majority of the commission if they so choose. So we're taking that away from the commission with those we're responsible for, which I'm willing to consider. But there is a reason why certain things are in place. Thank you.
Yeah, and that was, because there was talk during that charter review process of this term changing to a 4-year term, and I actually, even though it's to my detriment and inconvenience, I said I thought there was a lot of foresight from the people that initially drafted. Ours is pretty unique that you can, at any given time, have 3 new elected officials and completely change the direction of the city to the good or the bad. And honestly, that comes down to the public. That's your job, to get good candidates on the ballot and then get them in office, so.
But to that point, like you said, if there's a small group of people out there who's effectively changing the elected, you've got 3 votes. So everything that our 3 staff people have done for 10, 15, 20 years, every 2 years, they have to have that in the back of their mind.
Yeah.
To me, it gives them that peace of mind. It gives them that assurance. And so where we're not changing what the community may want or the constituents may want, which we can argue, is it a small group, the loudest, the most vocal, or the specific colored T-shirts, or is it truly the population does? And if we don't have a reason with just cause, like they're completely incompetent and they cost us millions of dollars, that we don't need that. We have grounds, but with no specific ground for termination, I think that certainly the supermajority of us should be the ones deciding that, and that just not come willy-nilly.
Yeah, I think debate for another day, because I want to make sure we all have a chance. But what constitutes grounds? How do you prove incompetence? You and I could, you might think something's incompetence, I might not. So it becomes subjective when you talk about performance. So that's a discussion. But I tend to agree with you. I think when it's time, when a change is needed. Look, this commission, the 5 of us went through 2 of them, and it was a unanimous vote in both cases. Maybe not without hesitation, but ultimately unanimous vote. I think the supermajority does protect against kind of the whims of the moment versus a true good strategic thought. But you make a valid point with the other. So I don't know. A different debate for a different day.
And I'm going to support the supermajority, but I felt that need to bring up the reason for that, and at least have that discussion.
Yeah. But it is. I've told our staff it's an interesting operating dynamic. What we ask our public sector employees to subject themselves to most people that sit out there and rail against them wouldn't do themselves and don't do themselves. They stay in the private sector and make double the money with more security. And you know, so that, I have tipped my hat many times to our staff. I appreciate that they're willing to serve the city, because many times it is a willingness. So, all right, do you have anything else?
No, that was it.
Those
Thank
are your
you.
2 items, all right. Vice Mayor, anything?
I'm just going to touch on them. US 1 CRA, you know, most of the, and I've said this before, most of the push for the US 1 CRA was taking all the crime statistics from the motels, showing the problem, the resources, police resources, code enforcement, all the hassle it takes to not only the city and the taxpayers, but also the detriment to the private businesses around them. We're well into that CRA now, and one of the things that I'm going to want to work with staff on, and I've given Colin a heads up, I've probably brought it up to you guys before, is I'm going to be looking for a specific program that goes after the motels, which is going to be some sort of funding source from the CRA if you're willing to change the use of those motels. Now, staff has warned me it's not necessarily going to be easy, but I believe the importance of that for the health of our community and US 1 is there's nothing more important on US 1. We can landscape, we can streetscape, we can hire more cops, but if we have what Chitwood correctly identified as crime incubators, we're gonna be running on a treadmill. And all we're gonna do is continue to dump more resources trying to go after these problem places. We're not gonna take anybody's rights. We're not gonna infringe on rights. We're just gonna hang a carrot out there that says, there's this incentive if you're willing to purchase or if you already own and change the use to a more conductive use that does not create a detriment to the community. The other thing is I need to point out, talking about the local road network that we have discussed, how we can have locals move around easier. It is amazing to me what happened when a 4-way stop sign went up at Wayne and Halleck. That was a big problem intersection. That Wayne, Halleck out to Pioneer Trail, going to get you out to 44, is used by a vast majority of people on the north side of town. And that stop sign, not being a 4-way stop sign, would back up 500-600 feet. You could be on Halleck heading north to make a right turn on Wayne to go towards US 1, and that intersection many times, or that lane, was backed up 500-600 feet. And the county, it was the county, right? We approved it, but it was the county.
Well, the county, they asked us for it. We brought it as an agenda item for the commission.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that with the county, yesterday, the county council approved the ISBA, which means that you will have Wayne Avenue and that section back to the city.
Right.
So
my point is, it is amazing the improvement that a 4-way stop sign made to the intersection. So think what we can do for the movement and traffic around town as we work on trying to identify local road networks to move people. And I, for one, I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of chirping about it. We're going to have a public meeting about the intersection at North Causeway and Peninsula. And I hear a lot of unhappiness about it. But I'm a firm believer in our original intent on that. And unless I see something earth-shattering, I'm going to be hard-pressed not to continue to support that, simply because we need to make changes, and sometimes even the smallest changes make a big difference. So I just want to talk about those. We can have a discussion if you want, but I think the US One thing is really one of my passions that I want to work on, and we've identified the city supporting it for a new CRA to the county. These motels are resource suckers, and that's something I just want to put on your radar.
Okay. As you do that, one thing, it's interesting you mentioned it, because I had somebody grab, I don't even remember who it was, but somebody at some event stopped me and was talking about, you know, we're one of the last places that has still that old US One feel. As you know, that used to be the major corridor from, you know, north to south, right? And so as you come through here, we have, you know, those old motels, and done right, they could be major tourist destinations. Like, people seek that out now when they're done right. Not as they are now, but I've seen them where they've been upscaled. They're modern but retro, if that makes sense. They've been modernized, they've been updated, but they feel very retro. You know, bright colors, well manicured, well landscaped, priced right. You know, it's not your stay by the night place, it's actually a destination. So I guess I support everything you just said. As you think of that though, and that program, I would be open to it staying as that use, but not at $40 a night. You know, that a whole separate, you know, attracting the right kind of clientele in that space that I also think would solve the problem and actually create some positives, you know, for other business owners along US One. So
I hear what you're saying. I'm open to I'm open to your idea, but I'm highly skeptical. But I'm open.
yeah,
Thank you. I'm open to
I don't know if the investment is there. I mean, the concept is solid. I can show you examples of it.
I know a lot of places in high density areas where they've done that.
Yeah.
Taking old motels on like A1As or South Beach and stuff like that. I just don't know if that would transfer over to US One.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if the investment, I don't know if the business case is there. I just would like to leave ourselves open to that if we can as part of the program.
Sure.
But you know, to me, it's all about that. It's all about the room rate. I mean, whatever else is done, it's got to get to a certain room rate level, or else you don't get away from what you don't solve the problem you're trying to solve, which is removing that kind of crime element, you know, or whatever it is. So, okay, Commissioner Sachs.
All right, gentlemen, I'll try and be brief, but this is a holistic conversation that I'd like to bring forward. And it has to do with the carrying capacity of our city. I think we've already exceeded it, not through all our fault. We're a popular place. We're an ecotourism capital. Whether the county likes it or not, I think they contribute to some of our woes, and that is traffic and congestion, overcrowding. And at the same time, and I hope I'm wrong, I see that we hire department heads. We hire department heads quite a bit, and it's a very high salary that they get. And then you see a lot of turnover in those departments. But what I'm not seeing is the people that work in those departments, not so much of. And maybe not because I'm looking in the right place, maybe staff hasn't presented it to us, but it seems like, let's just take maintenance operations. It feels like we don't have enough people in maintenance operations. It feels like we don't have enough police officers, and now firefighters we need to ramp that up as well. And so I think we need to take a lot of care going forward. It's going to take a concerted effort and a lot of thought to keep our city a livable place, an enjoyable place for we who pay taxes here. It's going to be a challenge going forward. You know, we sat here, and I really hated having heated discourse, not friendly, agreeable talk about making roads safer. I mean, it started from the last commission about Magnolia. And that's just one of the roads that's challenged. And those folks over there ended up getting speed humps. And now the folks next door are angry because they don't have the protections. Now their traffic has ramped up. So we're going to have a domino effect throughout our city. I know you all have problem areas. And I know, Vice Mayor, you've talked about streets connectivity to get the locals around. We haven't really attacked that problem. And we just continue to grow and grow and grow. And we continue to redevelop. I'm seeing a lot of redevelopment in our city, which will change its face, and it will change the congestion and our use of resources. So, you know, I threw a whole big ball of wax out there for us, and I really wanted to say, let's just put a trail over there at the Turnbull that we bought. We've been sitting on it for several years now. Why we can't just get started and build a trail? That would satisfy an open space park heading west. That would give people an opportunity to have more recreation other than Holland Park. But I am worried about our city going forward. I don't know what it wants to be. You know, some of the residents are very concerned about trees, as I am. And there was discussion, Angie Herman brought up, I think it was Randy possibly, brought up an urban tree program. These are essential to the quality of life around our city. Can you imagine if we didn't have any trees? And I know people laugh at, there goes a tree guy again, but they are essential to the ecosystem in our city. They control what quality of water goes out to the Indian River. So I'm going to bring it forward at the next meeting that we have staff look at an urban tree program that Winter Park has. It's supposedly very good. It doesn't co-opt or go around the state's preemption 163.045 as far as just the freelance cutting of trees. But I think we need to be more responsible. If we start in public spaces, that's good. That's the urban tree program. Privately, I don't know what we can tell the private sector or the corporate sector, but we need to retain that quality of life and, dare I say, charm. But the charm equates to quality of life. And you know, this 14 million, 13 and change coming is a help. I think it's going to help us get our heads above water, I hope. That we don't, I don't believe we're going to squander it, but spend it wisely. We've got a lot of challenges going forward. And you know, those challenges, we can see them on Riverside, we can see them on 44, on Flagler, on A1A. And guess what? We just got Saxon. We just inherited Saxon. And boy, is that a problem. In 5 years, you wouldn't believe how the face of Saxon has changed. The traffic has quintupled. So we got all these challenges as really, I'm very proud to sit up here with you guys, but we got a daunting task to keep this city nice. So I'm not going to belabor this subject, but
Okay.
we got our work cut out for us.
Commissioner Colodi.
Nothing.
All right.
So,
I defer to you, Mr. Mayor.
so both you and Jake mentioned Winter Park Forestry. And having worked there for 14 years and lived there for way too long, I mean, all my adult life. Have you been there and driven down there and looked at all the Y trees? And when those Y trees die because they're under power lines, where do they plant the new trees? Under the power lines? I mean, to me, you know, we can talk about these things, and I support your ideas, but it's not going to be at a fixed millage rate.
Yeah.
You know, an arborist is not cheap. Staff is not cheap. Vehicles aren't cheap. Winter Park doesn't have 200 acres of preserves along a water body that we have. So, there, you know, it's one thing if, I like comparing. I think Winter Park is a beautiful city, but it's not the same as New Smyrna Beach. You know, they don't have an ocean to deal with. They do have Orlando traffic driving through there every day, you know, twice a day, which can be challenging for public safety, along with people who live there, but they manage. So, you know, I don't disagree with your idea. Just remember the holistic look at all of this is eventually there's dollar signs at the end of that road. So, you know.
There may be, but can I just tack on real quick?
Sure.
We're growing. It was like 20% I think in the last less than 10 years. The growth was exponential. And 20% doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people, but let's go back to our staff. Let's look at staff. Let's look at how we take care of the city. With all this growth and influx, we have to keep up. I'm not looking at this urban tree program as like, this is going to cost several $100,000. Well, maybe we can take the best from it and learn from it if they have something to offer. But I know that just recently, a lot of Winter Park residents have second homes here. And so they bring their input and they bring the good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you as well live there. If they're doing something right, maybe we can learn from them. But I'm afraid of growth because, growth is a good thing, yes. It has some good aspects, but again, there's that carrying capacity. It's how much tax money it actually brings in as opposed to how much we have to pay for the new growth. Gosh, it's pretty daunting.
Yep.
But I like your comment. I want to do some more study on the urban tree program.
And I don't disagree with anything you said. My mention of Winter Park was exactly in the same context. I continually hear it brought forward as, they have this, they do this. And I remind folks, they have a different millage rate than we do. They have a different budget than we do. And they have different property values than we do. And so if that's the quality of life we want to achieve, we can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't talk about those kind of benchmarks and programs. And to your point, I contend we're at a spot where I don't know where the capacity is to hand staff a lot more things. I feel like they're pretty tapped. I'm not saying there's not a minute here or there and we're at optimum efficiency, but to take the best of an urban forestry program and not expect it to cost a couple $100,000. The reality is by the time you layer in the personnel, the ongoing expenses, et cetera, it absolutely would. And so we oftentimes want to talk about those things in response to what we hear from the public, but then when it comes budget time and millage time, we also want to be able to tell people we've kept their millage low. And we can't do both. You can't live in a nicer house on the same salary you have today. You got to get a pay raise somehow. And so I think that's where I contend we're at as a city, is an inflection point of, do we stay at the quality of life and standard of living we have had, or do we embrace some of these new things and these bigger ideals and visions and try to even solve some of the existing problems and upgrade in some ways our quality of life and standard of living? And that's a debate that we can have, but I've said it publicly many times. We need to hear from the public. The way I've read the room lately is the line at the podium is, I want this, I want this, I want this. And then it comes millage time. I don't hear from too many people that are complaining about their millage. They're probably not even here. They're probably over in Winter Park, and this is their second home. So I just, that's how I read the room. So I think we have not just us, previous commissions as well. I think we've handcuffed ourselves a little bit in trying to keep our millage rate, that's super, super low. And, eventually we're gonna have to pay the piper. I mean, that's the reality is, and I said it earlier, we can't meet the repaving budget. We can't probably, we're struggling to keep up with some of the personnel, and we're doing ourselves a disservice. The voters passed a $15 an hour minimum wage, and we're trying to implement that and not pass that along, We can't cover that cost. I mean, we can't. The reality is that that was voted on by the general public, so they should expect a commensurate increase in our revenue budget, which is their tax budget. Those two are one and the same. I mean, that's the reality for it. I mean, we didn't put that in place. We didn't just arbitrarily say we want to go to $15 an hour. We're responding to, that's an unfunded mandate, if you will. We've got to fund it somehow. So we can either cut services or we can increase the funding. So again, I encourage you all. I'm having very candid, frank conversations with citizens about that. I don't want it to be a surprise. I don't want anyone to be, surprised when come budget time, we're adding up all of these costs and saying this is the millage rate we need for that. That's not the time to line up at the podium and say, no, let's go to rollback rate. I mean, we can't do that anymore. We either have to have that strategic conversation now that we're targeting that, so therefore we need to stop talking about urban forestry and repaving and anything else, or yes, we're going to embrace those needs and we're going to fund it as needed. So, all right, I've said quite enough this meeting, so I will also defer my time. Any closing comments from anyone else? Any last things?
Yes.
Yes.
Could we concentrate this next fiscal year on fixing up our infrastructure, even if let's start chipping away at it. We had a lot of things sitting here as long as we've been here. We haven't, like Old Fort Park, like Women's Club, our parks are in a bit of disrepair, and it's just wear and tear. We have to stay up on these things. And to me, they're legacy costs as well as salaries that we, don't just build it and it's going to be there forever. The ocean's going to take that salt there, those bromides are going to take it away if we don't maintain all of our assets.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think what I heard earlier in the ARPA funding was most of us, I think, said something to the same effect. We're committed to investing in with not only that funding, but even during the ongoing budget conversations. I know I've said the same thing. I want to focus on what we have now. I mean, that's disappointing in a way because I also want some new things. I want new pickleball courts. I want a park that rivals. I don't love it that the nicest park in Southeast Volusia is in Edgewater. I wanted a New Smyrna. Our sports complex is way better, so I'll take that win. But I definitely want new things. But as it is right now, with where we're at funding wise, I do think we have to invest in maintaining what we have. So I think I heard pretty broad agreement on that. All right, with that, we will adjourn this workshop. Thank you all for being here. And for the commission, we have the next session is at 1 o'clock. That is a closed executive session.